It's asking me for an intro video. Oh, shoot. No, I don't have an intro video. Hello there, good people. Hi, Jason here with Green Country Agriforce. Your fashionably late, as always. Let me go ahead and double check and make sure. Nope. That might actually help. Yeah, that helps. Might help to have the actual microphone turned on. This is, of course, the new standalone microphone that I got during the summer and never really used that much. Hello there. Sorry about that. Rushing to the last minute as usual. I'm going to have to get up and run over there and throw the damper on the stove because I was in a rush to get it started up. I let it go all the way cold and then got the ashes out because we had a warm day today. Pardon me while I adjust the hat. I look dorky. Sorry about that. had to get the stove to cool down so I could get the ashes out into the pail and take them out there. They're going to cool off the rest of the way. There's a couple small embers that were left, but occasionally you do have to rake your ashes out and put them somewhere, or else you have problems with that ash building up inside the stove. Anyway, today was a warm enough day. I figured we'd get that done, and that put me at well, right now, just getting the fire restarted. So give me 1 second to adjust that. And while I do that, I'm going to show you something. What am I going to show you? Let's see. I'm going to show you a picture of the world. Well, not a picture of the world. I'm going to show you a picture of North America. So let's share the screen here. What do we got here? We've got this window right here, I believe. This is the one we want to show. And let me check and make sure you can see it good. Let's move my picture down here to the side. Do you even really need to see me here? Let's just take a look at the subject material. Let's take a look at the subject material. And here you go, put myself over here. I guess it doesn't really matter. I can fit myself in either side. Okay. That will work. Oh, wow, look, I'm moving my mouse pointer. All right. Let's have a look at this particular thing here. I hope you guys can see it okay. This is a picture of North America. Let me move my mouse pointer so you can see. If you look at the black outlines, you can see the modern day outline of where North America is. You can kind of tell by the states. We're right here. We're right here in Oklahoma. This entire, well, we'll get back to all of this here in just a second here. We're right here in Oklahoma. This is where I'm sitting right here. But this outline is where it is now. It's not where this was 92 million years ago. This is as close to a map of 100 million years ago as I could find. I found one for 92. But at this time, North America was not here. It hadn't quite made it here yet. As a matter of fact, a lot of this space here where my mouse pointer is, this space here is called the Western Interior Seaway. This was open at this time, connected with the Labrador Seaway, which is up here, all the way around here, and the Hudson Seaway, which came up through the Hudson Bay here, making this great big separating the North American continent, what would eventually become the North American continent, because we're not even a continent at this point. We were just a couple of land masses drifting towards each other, separating this up into separate land masses. We have this landmass here, which they've called Appalachia. Yep, turns out Oklahoma is actually in Appalachia. And of course, it's sitting here with this seafloor, which is moving off this direction to the west towards California, sinking into a rift. There's a great big rift right out here that is pulling this landmass to the west, making it drift. It's like, why is it drifting to the west? Because this landmass is drifting to the west, and the seafloor down here at the bottom is going down into this rift. It's being pulled into the rift, being pulled into the mantle. That's drawing the continent across. All right, so we got this picture. Over here to the west, here where we eventually wind up with California, we have another landmass, and they're calling this landmass, this is 100 million years ago, Laramidia. Laramidia, from which we get the Laramide formation of the Rocky Mountains. But this is 100 million years ago or close to it, and the Rocky Mountains haven't formed yet. What's all this mountainous stuff over here? Well, this is what was there before the Rocky Mountains, and it wasn't even, well, I guess it was actually here. See, this part over here, the eastern part, it's the part that's moving. The western part, it's not moving. It's sitting here like a great big old wall out here in the Pacific Ocean going, oh crud, there's a continent coming towards us and we're getting ready to collide. See, it hasn't formed this continent yet. It's two separate land masses. This is the cool part. So out here, all we've got are a whole bunch of volcanic seamounts that have risen up to the surface and formed these plains, lots and lots of basalt plains, whatever Earth is built up over on the top of it. But that's what's over here on the west coast, what will eventually become California. It's all volcanic rock formations at this point. And this is the really cool part. Almost all of what you see represented here is landmass. At the place where California will one day be, almost all of this is not here anymore. It moved, and it moved up to the north. So it made a move to the northwards as the North American continent plunged into this deep rift here at the base of this volcanic formation. This is the reason why you have the same sort of appearance on the west coast that you do down there in South America where the Andes Mountains are formed, where you have subduction zone, ocean plate going under the continent. Well, it's going under and it's pushing up and it's creating that volcanic ridge. And then there's that ridge is still there. The trench is still there. Well, it's not there anymore. The place where the trench is wounded up, well, the place where this trench here 100 million years ago wound up stopped filling in with seafloor coming in from the east about 53 million years ago. But the continental mass continued to drift. And now this rift deep underground, way deep underground, is sitting right here under the east coast because the continent kept on moving. After this event, filled in the trench, continent keeps on moving. What's causing it to move? Another rift zone. So we're sitting here watching these segments of Earth's crust move around over the course of the time. Of course, this is a picture for 100 million years ago. We're close to it. 92 million years ago. Here it is, 92 million years ago. Let me jump back over here and see how everybody's. I'm glad we actually got people in here. Give me 1 second here. I've got to run and take care of the stove real quick before it gets away from us. Just wanted to say hello to everybody in the room at the moment. Homestead for a Living, Vicky Savage, Grandma Zoo picking them, eat them, Lily Gazelle, and Brian Perendi, all saying howdy, howdy, howdy. All the crazy Americans present and accounted for. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to be right back. I just want you to have a gander at this, and I want you to think about something. See, this landmass right over here. Let me move the mouse pointer so you can see it there. Right over here. This landmass right over here. This is Oklahoma. Now, on the outline, this is where I'm sitting right now. But this landmass that's here, it's not here today. All this landmass that was here 100 million years ago is now sitting underneath the Appalachian Mountains over here, about 1,000 kilometers deep into the mantle. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that all of that went into this rift here, and starting at about 80 million years back, started pushing up the Rocky Mountains, finished up about 53 million years ago, and all of that material that got plunged into that rift is now sitting right over here. I'll tell you what, that's something to think about. I'll be right back. That's a lot of Earth changes taking place. I mean, that's the entire continent has changed. Literally, the whole surface of it has rolled over, gone underground, and passed under our feet over the course of that 100 million years. I'll be right back. Yeehaw. All right, good. All right. Hello again, good people. Hey, Jason here, Green Country Agriforce, back again. I got my my wood stove set up so that it's not going to get too hot over there. I hope, but it's not going to get too cold in here because it's nighttime now. The sun's gone down. We put the birds to bed. We've got the kitties. That's kitties, Kitties, inside so they can stay nice and warm. But right now they aren't causing a ruckus, which is good. And of course, tonight we're going to talk about how we need to get over it because nothing, at least in North America, nothing is really truly native here, with the exception of a few fungi, some protozoa, a few microbes, and of course, tardigrades, which can survive anything. Vicky's saying, interesting, my place in Arkansas is part of the original Appalachian landmass. It is. It is. Isn't that cool, though? And on either side of this, let me move the mouse pointer over here. On either side of this Western Interior Seaway, this is not just a low spot in the continent. This is a place where two land masses are coming together to eventually form a continent. Very important distinction. This isn't America got submerged in water. This is America hasn't formed yet. This water is ocean floor. So whenever we come over here and we're looking at Arkansas, yeah, that landmass was further east over here, and then it's moved, and finally it winds up where it is today. So all of this land has shifted considerably. All right, this was 92 million years in the past. We want to go and take a look. Oh, before I move to a different picture, I want you to have a look up here. We've got we have Appalachia, we got Laramide over here. You can see where the Hudson Bay is going to be eventually as all these pieces come in. You can see where some of this stuff is going to be eventually. All right. What do you not see? Anybody at all notice what is not in that picture? What's not in the map? Something's not on this map. It's 100 million years in the past. What do you not see covering large portions of North America? 3, 2, 1. Any guesses? Any guesses? There are no glaciers. No glaciers. It's not that there isn't any ice at all. There's no glacier ice. There's no polar ice caps or anything of that nature. But at this particular point in time, we don't have glaciers covering North America. It's before the Ice Age expansion. That's kicked off. I want to say probably about 2 to 3 million years ago. All right. So we don't have glaciers covering all of this area. We don't have glaciers covering any of this. And this area right down here, this area right here is a tropical marshland, a tropical coastal marsh. All right, so this is a tropical coastal marsh right down in this area. There are no glaciers. Let's move on to our next picture. Let's go to 77 million years. Let me see if I got that. Let's stop sharing that one. Okay, I'm going to have to do it this way. Hang on. Like that. There we go. All right, we are wanting this one. This gets us to 77 million years before right now. A little bit different map. We still have the Western Interior Seaway right here. What have you noticed, though? This is at 77 million years. At about 80 million years in the past, that's maybe 3 million years before this point in time, the Rocky Mountains are starting to form. Now, This area out here, Laramidia, was at one time, let me get the pointer right here. This at one time, this was all volcanoes. There was a bunch of basalt plains here. Now, as this continent is moving and this gap is starting to close, it looks like the water level is rising, but actually the gap is closing. The rift is getting filled in, and as it's filling, as this space is filling up to the point where things have to shift, the continent is beginning to rise, which means that very, very shortly after this time, you're going to see the seaway close off. So at this point, this is just at the point where the continent starts to rise, the seaway starts to close off, and all of this ecology is about to change dramatically. Not only is this area here going to experience between that 80 million and 53 million years in the past point, that's not very long, it's a few million years, but very rapid expansion of the Rocky Mountains being shoved up here. It's going to experience being slammed into this continental mass, and the convergence of all of the species of flora and fauna on both of these land masses are getting ready to come together. So a whole bunch of things are about to change in short order. Let's go to an important mark in history. Let's see, we want to switch. Let's see, I want to present this one. Which one? Video files. Why don't we go into video files? Act like I've never done this before. Stop the screen. There we go. I'm going to share this one. Here we go. This one is 65 million years ago, and you might see a name down here at the very bottom that could possibly look familiar to some people. You see this name down here? That is Chicxulub. Chicxulub, Mexico. It's not quite in frame. Not quite in frame here. But Chicxulub, Mexico, at 65 million years ago, is the point where a 10-kilometer asteroid or cometary fragment, one or the other, impacted this area of the Earth, this portion of North America, right down here at the bottom of the screen. The area that was devastated by the impact, as far as places where living things on the surface would have been killed, I'm estimating that by where the trees would have been knocked flat and all the living creatures in the area killed instantly by the pressure wave. This particular event would have annihilated all life immediately from all the way out here past where Florida will one day eventually be. So this is ocean at that time. Well, actually, it might not have been ocean. That might have been landmass. But remember, it's been shifting all the way up, covering most of Tennessee, right? All of the Gulf states. And we get to Tennessee, a little bit of Illinois, about half of Missouri. Did it get Oklahoma? Yeah, it looks like it got Oklahoma too. Looks like it got a part of Kansas. Kansas got either most or almost all of Texas, and a huge portion of Mexico, all the way around this area, this huge swath. Everything did. Of course, beyond the immediate kill, we've got a large amount of atmosphere that was ejected, which caused a lot of our terrestrial animals worldwide, the large ones, to go extinct eventually. What else do we notice? Well, at this point, 65 million years ago, not too distant from 77, whenever I said this is the point where it's beginning to close up. Well, look at this. All of this area that was inland seaway, western interior seaway, all closed up. Well, almost all closed up. We got a little bit left here. All right, this is the Mississippi River right here. This is moving off. This is where Oklahoma will be here. So this is western interior seaway closing up. This is 65 million years. So in what, 7 million years from this point, the Rocky Mountains will be fully formed. But at this point, you can already see them starting to pop up here. But no polar ice yet. All right. Close this one. We're going to jump ahead. We're going to jump ahead a huge, huge bit to the point where we start seeing human beings showing up here in North America. Let's present this next picture here. Now, we are told that human beings like us started being seen coming out of Africa around 180 to 190,000 years ago. This particular picture is a picture of North America at 126,000 years ago. About 4,000 years away from the time period where someone out here on the coast of California either killed or came upon a mammoth that had been killed, cooked it, and ate it. It was a group of people. We don't know exactly who they were because they didn't leave any traces other than the fact that, one, they were intelligent, two, they used fire, three, they had an appreciation for symmetry, and four, they ate the mammoth. That's about all we know. But they left their campfire here on a beach about 130,000 years ago. They're on the coast of California. There were human beings here. There were mammoths here. What else was here? Well, there's a couple of really big glaciers here. You have the Coeur d'Alene ice sheet over here covering the west coast, and you've got the Laurentide sheet over here coming all the way down. And at one point, at its maximum, it would have come down and just barely touched the upper bit of Kansas right there at its furthest reach. The Laurentide sheet just barely touched Kansas. But you can see at the maximum, or close to the maximum, this is about 126,000 years ago, large portions of the continent are free of ice. Free of ice. No glaciers. Huge portions. And of course, this brings us to the absurd claim of invasive non-native earthworms in North America. The idea was presented that because the glaciers killed off all of the native earthworms in North America, the earthworm that we find in North America, which is also found in Europe, must have been brought over here from Europe by European colonizers who are just naughty, naughty people for bringing their invasive species over here and despoiling our pristine and untouched wilderness lands. You detect a little bit of disdain in my voice. It's because it's there. It's because this is ideologically driven, and it's not based upon the factual record of history at all. As it turns out, there are three common types of nightcrawler found in North America. There's the Lumbricus terrestrius, which is also called the Canadian nightworm, or Canadian nightcrawler. It is found in Europe also. There is the Itis hortensis, or most commonly called European nightcrawler, which is also found in North America. And of course, there's the Asian nightcrawler, or Polynesian jumping worm. There's a whole bunch of different common names for it, and it has its own particular subclass and phylum as well, found in the southern states, which does, of course, include everything from, I would imagine, Kansas on south, although I'm being told that those worms have found their way further north and are able to survive further north nowadays than they used to be because of general warming trends and better conditions, more favorable conditions for them to come in and populate areas that were at one time scoured clean of all life entirely by glaciers. This Laurentide sheet here at its height was, as I said, reaching down all the way here to this point here, where the mouse pointer is, Kansas. And at its thickest point, somewhere around here, would have been up to 4 miles or even more thick. Nothing living under this thing. Everything that has appeared under where this glacier is, 100%, all of it non-native, except for maybe tardigrades. They might have survived there. All right. So my first encounter was this, with somebody saying, "Oh no, you've got jumping worms. Look out! It's going to be horrible for your environment." It's like, what are you talking about? This is a night crawler. They're important for the health of a forest ecosystem. They take all that leaf litter and convert it into organic matter in the soil. And they said, "Well, no, it disrupts the root systems of the plants and makes it so they can't survive, and it's bad for them." I thought, this is strange, because there are some grasses that were imported from Europe that are definitely not native. And yeah, people did plant them in their yards. And yeah, this particular nightcrawler will make it difficult for those particular grasses to survive, because those are very short rooted grasses and not really suitable to survive in areas where forests are being formed. And forests that are being formed have the nightcrawler as one of those engineering creatures that help develop the forest ecosystem. So yeah, you're going to see a succession of one form of ecosystem as it's transiting from this form to a new form. The form it was at before was more of a pioneer form. What do you have that you can make do with until better ecosystem engineers come in to replace what was lost during the previous ecological catastrophe? In the case of North America, of course, this one, the formation of the ice sheet, which reached its maximum about 20,000 years in the past, that was a huge ecological catastrophe. And of course, that's the one that we're currently restoring ourselves from. Although we do have some difficulties, because occasionally people will just dig their heels in and say, no, we've got these species here. These are our native species. We don't want any other species coming in here. Oh, no. Without stopping to think about the fact that they themselves, the human beings, and every living thing in their environment is non-native. At this point, it's not about conservation, it's about restoration. And we want to restore healthy forest ecosystems. And granted, yes, there are ecosystems that are making do without earthworms for a little while, but they do belong there, and they are coming back into those ecosystems, which are going to become even more abundant as they adjust to the introduction or reintroduction of an important keystone species. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this one. We're going to go on to a different picture. How you guys doing out there? Are you enjoying this presentation? Hey, if you're enjoying this presentation, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, hit the like button, share it with people. I know I haven't been doing these sort of educational videos for a while. I've gotten out of the habit of it. Hopefully, I'll try to get back into the habit. Mary says she finally got caught up. That's awesome. That's awesome. Vicky says, if I recall correctly, the Atlantic Ocean is getting wider and the Pacific Ocean is shrinking. Oh, well, it was at one time. I don't know if it still is. I was thinking for a minute about calling up one of my geologist friends and asking if they wanted to pop in and chime in and let me know where I'm off base and get my dates exactly right. I know it's about 53 million years before the present is actually when the Rocky Mountains stopped forming. That's when it stopped. So all the chaos and destruction stopped about 53 million years ago. And from that point on, we've had entirely different chaos and destruction. Entirely different chaos and destruction coming out. Oh, my apologies. Because all the glaciers, the primary crop in the alluvial areas is rocks. Well, you get a lot of rocks. You get a lot of rock left behind as they withdraw. Vicky saying ecological invasions result in dynamic equilibrium. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, is we're trying to create a dynamic equilibrium. Currently in these areas, and thank you for pointing this out, Vicky. Currently in these areas, Minnesota, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. Sorry, Minnesota. Minnesota is one of the states that Wisconsin is another one that have a lot of rules about what you can import, right? You can buy worms at the bait shop, but don't turn them loose because they may contain worms that are non-native. Well, they're going to be non-native and they're bad for the environment. So you got to be careful what you do with the worms. What do you do when they get off the hook? But other things, trees, certain trees you cannot import into Wisconsin or into Minnesota, because their natural wildlife or conservation departments. Oh no, you can't have those in here. And they may be trees that are actually already there, that are nativized, that have become accustomed to living in this area, but we don't want any more of these trees. No, they're not native to our area. Nothing is native to your area. Nothing is native to your area. For a long time, your trees that were there, pioneer species that got in there, things that managed to get nativized, despite the fact that people have been trying to keep new natives. This is a new thing. It's this very new thing that they've been trying to keep new species from coming in. But for a long time, whenever the trees caved, they leafed out, the leaves fell, the leaves fall on the ground, and they pile up and they get thick and they get thick and they get thick and they get thick, and then they start to get moldy, and then slowly they'll mold through, and then they'll build mats, and they become this spongy mat of material. And there's certain things that grow and live in that particular ecosystem. Well, one of the things that the earthworm does, or the nightcrawler does, whenever it hits this ecosystem, is goes, okay, we got a serious imbalance here. Let's get this thing fixed. We're going to take all of this organic matter that's sitting up here, growing spongy and oxidizing on the surface, and we're going to convert it. And we're going to make these little pellets of organic matter that'll retain moisture and add texture to the soil and provide pockets for microbial life, which wasn't existent before. So you can have a nice, healthy balance of fungal and microbial life and develop a more advanced forest ecosystem than one that's just barely hanging on there. And so that's what it does. They come in and they start making this alteration. All right. Now, whenever they first start, because there's so much litter, there's so much of this material that needs to be processed. What happens whenever you have an abundant food source and something moving in, finding the abundant food source? It comes in, it eats the food source, goes, woo, multiplies, and you get a whole bunch of them. You get an oversupply of these earthworms, these night crawlers moving in. And of course, we're at that stage now, whenever they're starting to see them show up, and people are panicking because there are so many. There are so many, and they can see that they're just tearing through all this stuff, all the leaf litter, stripping it out, processing it, getting rid of it. And they don't know what to do. It's like, oh my gosh, we're not used to seeing this. We don't know what to do with it. All the plants that we had that were dependent upon this particular type of forest floor in order for them to survive, they've got shallow root systems. They don't know how to survive in a normal, healthy forest. They're specialists that have wound up being stranded here and have survived, despite the fact that they're not really native. They're not native. They're not supposed to be there. What's supposed to be there? I don't know what's supposed to be there. It's a transitory process. It's an ecosystem in the process of becoming, and it's always changing. So embrace the diversity, realize that we will achieve a dynamic equilibrium. The worms are not going to be here in oversupply forever, because once they get caught up on that leaf litter, they won't have an oversupply of food anymore. They'll just have enough to keep up with demand. And that's all we need them for, is to keep up with demand. That will clear out the duff and the forest floor, creating room for different species to move in and occupy niches in the forest floor and accomplish that all-important task of photosynthesis and collaboration and cooperation with the other species, both plant and animal and microbial and fungal, in that ecosystem, in a healthy ecosystem. All right. Tim is saying, are you in McGirt County? I am in Tulsa County, over here next to Osage County. Smart enough to be an idiom. All right. Let me go ahead and grab ourselves another picture here. So we showed you what was there at 126,000. I'm going to move over now to between 15 to 12,000 years ago. And this one, let me go over here. This picture here is pretty close. Pretty close to today. So by this time, in this particular picture, we don't have dissynchronization. We don't have, how should I put this? We don't have a dissynchronization with the eventual outline of North America and where the landmass actually is. So all of this here, this landmass that was once called Appalachia, has made the full transit over, has encountered. You see where the rift is? It's still here. Well, or the effects of it are still here, right? Right here. But it's encountered that stationary rift. It's bumped up. It's closed off this interior seaway. But now we've entered into an ice age. And I should have pointed out something. Let me back up a minute. This is at 12,000. Let me go. Stop sharing that one. Let me go with where were we at? Oh, here we go. Oh, well, that won't help. Boy. Let's see. 65. There we go. 65 is about as close as I could get. I couldn't find one. My apologies. I couldn't find one for approximately, what was that? 630,000 years ago. I couldn't find one for there. So we'll just have to make do with this one here. So right up, where are we at? There's Nebraska. There's Colorado. Here's the Rocky Mountains. And right around here, we have a volcano called Yellowstone. And around like 630 or 640,000 years ago, this one popped off and engulfed a large area, about 4 states, with immediate pyroclastic flows, killing off everything there, and then had an ash plume that covered a few more states, sort of an oval about this big. Now, over the course of that particular caldera, it has popped and blown ash all over the place. But as far as being thick enough to have really altered ecosystems, you might have had some things die off into Nebraska, right? We did get ash all the way down here in Oklahoma, but I don't think it was enough to kill anything off. But you may have had, as far as into Nebraska, you could have had casualties from that particular ash flow at 630, 640,000 years ago. So this region here at that point was also knocked out. So let's see. We had Chicxulub come up, knock everything out here. We had the Western Interior Seaway here, close up completely until they radically alter everything all through this corridor, all up through the Hudson Seaway, the Labrador Seaway, all of this stuff, all of it new. Rocky Mountains form, cataclysmic event, totally changed the landmass here from one type to another type. Changing ecosystems have to have entirely new tenants and residents. Some things can stay, but a lot of things just have to go whenever the ecosystem changes. And we wound up changing into an entirely different ecosystem here with the formation of the Rocky Mountains. Oh, I almost forgot about, switch back over to, stop sharing that one. Okay. Let me switch back over to our most recent. Here. There we go. Oh my goodness. How you guys doing out there? Okay. This is funny because my mouse pointer isn't exactly right. So at this point, we've had human beings here for a long time. Remember, back here on the coast of California, about the time that, well, shoot, everything was still moving at that point. No, was it? No, everything stopped moving. It was 130,000, right, before present. So we had human beings here. They were hunting mammoths here. This is now at 12,000 years ago, and this portion right here where I've got the mouse pointer is what I want to look at right here, because this right here is right along where that rift was. I say the rift was there. There is still a rift there, but that rift valley that was once there, it's moved. It's now buried 1,000 kilometers deep and under the East Coast because the continents keep on drifting. But the rift formation is still there. And this area right here where the mouse pointer is the Sea of Cortez, bounded by Baja California. And this is the Colorado River that runs up through here. And of course, it passes by Phoenix, Arizona. At about this point in time, because we've still had tectonic activity, and once again, the Seaway is still actually in the process of closing up because this continent is being lifted up by these two plates coming together. This region right here uplifts and causes the water to drain away from where Phoenix, Arizona is now. And that loss of all of the water coming up into this region effectively created the Sonora Desert at about 10,000 years ago. So you had an area where things were living, and then it changes to a desert ecosystem. And you could always talk about conservation and say, well, we've got a desert ecosystem here and we want to conserve it. I don't know. If I was a doctor and I had a patient that came in that was blind, and I knew that by adjusting their diet to eat food that was readily available to them, all you have to do is go, hey guys, you need more beta carotene in your diet and your eyesight's going to clear up. Do you have carrots? And they go, yeah, we've got carrots, but we don't eat them. So, well, why don't you eat them? Well, we're not allowed to eat them. You're not allowed to eat the carrots? No, we've got laws that say that we can't eat the carrots. But if you eat the carrots, if you're just allowed to eat the food that will bring you health, your eyesight will improve. You eat the carrots and your eyesight will. Well, we're not going to do that. Why aren't you going to do that? Because we're trying to conserve our blindness. Okay. All right. I can recommend things as a physician, but I can't force you to take the treatment. We have what is clear to me, and I think should be clear to everyone else by this point, a continent that has formed over the course of the past 100 million years, and during the course of this time has undergone tremendous changes in its ecosystems from a wide variety of sources, from external factors such as the Chicxulub impact, which struck down here about the time that we had the Western Interior Seaway. So this was actually all underwater. Otherwise, this would have been a much bigger deal than it was. A 10-kilometer wide asteroid struck what was mostly water at the time. Kind of important. If it hadn't been, oof, much worse deal than it would have been. Sorry, my mouse pointer's in the wrong spot. My screen is in the right spot. So right there, right about here is where the Chicxulub impactor hits. All of this area, Baja California, most of Mexico, most of Texas, most of Oklahoma, all of the Gulf states, most of Tennessee, all of Florida, all the Caribbean, portions of South America, all of this area here, the force of this impact was such that anything in that area, living creatures, unless it was underground, maybe earthworms. Possibly earthworms survived, but most terrestrial creatures on the surface would have been killed instantly by that impact. It was huge, a huge catastrophic effect. And of course, the global effect was even greater, but not felt fully for quite some time afterwards. All right. Ooh, Owen's asking some very good questions here. Do you think there's always a guarantee of a dynamic equilibrium that lets people survive, though? Or do you think it's possible to lose? Really good question here. Or do you think it's possible to lose enough biodiversity that bad stuff happens? Yeah. Like I always worry that maybe if you lost enough biodiversity, just like flesh-eating amoebas might take over and eat all multicellular life or something. Okay. No, there's no guarantee that we're going to have enough biodiversity. As a matter of fact, if not for the activities of human beings, it's quite possible that many species could be lost. And this is kind of interesting in the area of conservation. We often think in terms of conserving habitats in conservation. And this is partially a good idea, but we need to adapt our thinking somewhat. It's the preservation of those individual species that's the most important. And the best way that we can get to preserve a species is to get that species spread to areas other than one or two individual isolated locations where a reservoir of that species can survive. If we adopt the approach of, I don't want any non-native species coming into my ecosystem, then we don't have any place to share those species with. And whenever the event comes, and it will come, that causes that ecosystem where that creature lives, or where that plant lives, where that microbe lives, where that fungi lives, where that specimen of life happens to live. Whenever that ecological system changes, if we have not moved it to another niche, if we haven't moved it to another location, if we haven't spread it, then it will go extinct. So if we're not ready to embrace the adaptation of new biological material, then yeah, we could run into a place where there isn't enough biodiversity and we don't attain a biological equilibrium. Something will take over and run with it, and yeah, we'll have big problems. Flip side of this, once it's done its thing, whatever that thing is, but flesh-eating bacteria, Amylaria fungus in the Pacific Northwest, good example of a monster eating just a lot of biomass. Once it's done doing its thing and it doesn't have anything left to eat, it's going to burn out. The only hope that we have is we have moved enough diversity in these places where that is going on to pick up. So what's going on in the Pacific Northwest is large monocultures of pine, because they logged the area and they wanted to plant something, and they said, well, we'd like to log pine, let's plant more pine. And so they cut the trees, they planted more trees. And the tree that they planted in the Pacific Northwest was a lot of pine. So you get out there and you get into the Rocky Mountains, also lots of pine, and you see these huge forests that are just pine trees, lots and lots of pinnaceates. And as far as the eye can see, it forms a monoculture. Limited species diversity, and of course this has other effects on downstream. Other effects, limits the number of animal life, or the amount and diversity and diversity of animal life that can live in these areas. Pines have some species that associate with them, but they have a tendency to close off everything from canopy down to the forest floor and only allow a few other species to compete in that area. So they're not overall very good to have predominantly nothing but pinaceates. Even if it's a variety of different pinaceates, you want to have different types of trees. Some pines is good, a mix of pines, deciduous trees and coniferous trees. You want to have a mix of these because you want to have some of your biological processes going on at all times. Evergreens are good. They're always alive, right? They're always doing some energy capture. They're always putting out some sugars into the soil. They're always feeding some microbes. They're always feeding some fungi. So even in the periods of the year whenever you don't have a whole lot of solar energy coming in, your coniferous species, your pinaceates, because they're evergreens, are still doing their work for the ecosystem. So some of them is good. But once again, monocultures, bad. Get rid of the monocultures. What's happening out there on the West Coast is that Amylaria, the honey fungus, is eating up pine trees. It is gobbling them up at a record pace. It's growing to massive sizes, hundreds of acres, maybe even thousands now. I'm not sure how big the thing is. But whenever it's done running its course and it gets rid of the excess of pine trees, provided, of course, that there is sufficient seeds in the seed bank or human beings are willing to go in and do the work of planting trees that are not susceptible to the Amylaria in the wake of its destroying the pines, then yeah, these areas can recover. The forests can recover and it can be a healthy ecosystem again. Big problem we have is political considerations that are keeping a hands-off approach to nature. With the hands-off approach, we can't recover. Or we're relying upon accidents for our recovery, despite the fact that we have the ability to participate and help build back the ecosystems that have been damaged. Bunny rabbits survive in rabbit holes? Perhaps. Maybe. It was a serious overpressure event. So maybe, but maybe not. Maybe if they're deep enough, perhaps. But once again, I guess it would depend upon how far away you were from that blast center. Bunny rabbits in Kansas probably survived. In Oklahoma, maybe. Hey, how about the Loch Ness Monster? Did it go extinct? Who knows? If the Loch Ness Monster is a bunch of eels, then no, it hasn't gone extinct. They're still there. They're eels. Yeah. Yeah, it's called honey fungus is the common name for it. It's the genus Amylaria, and you can have a look at some of the forests out there out west. It's just devouring acres and acres and acres of it, and it doesn't need to, but it's two different. On the one hand, yes, it's a tragedy. It's destroying so much of the forest. On the other hand, it's taking care of a problem. And what we would need to do is recognize that, oh, crud, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have planted so many pine trees. Let's go back in and correct the mistake now by planting a diversity of species. That's what we should be doing. Whether or not we will actually do that or not, I don't know. Not my pay grade, unfortunately. They don't ask me to solve these problems. It's a National Park Service level sort of thing, and there would have to be some sort of political will to do something about it, I guess. Otherwise, we just wait. Eventually, the fungus will destroy enough pine trees And either there will be pioneers that move in and occupy that space, or there won't be. But we would be far better off if we were to start the process of moving things in. And you don't have to move in things that are exotic from far, far away. You can move in things that are nearby. As a matter of fact, that's usually how it happens naturally, is the things that are nearby, when the conditions are appropriate, will move into that area and go, okay, you had a desert, but the weather patterns have changed now, and we've got water accumulating in these low areas. We've got organic matter building up. We've got life forming here, and I think we can move in and have something besides just an acacia in here or a cottonwood. Maybe we can go with something a little daring. How about that? How about an alder? Yeah, we'll have some alder trees in here. Well, alders are another uh, water loving species, and of course nitrogen fixers among other things. And Owen is asking more good questions. Oh, hang on, Vicky. What do you think happens if the forests don't generally come back in? Just more arid USA generally? Yeah, unfortunately, that is what it looks like. Our plains area, the Great Plains, whenever we were at this point on the map that I've got up there on the screen, at that 12 to 15,000 year mark, um, we had Great Plains that were being maintained at this point by bison. From that 100,000 year mark to this point, it was mostly mastodons, Columbian mammoths, and they ranged everywhere there was no ice. So all the way up here from the edge of the sheet, all the way down into South America, even you had the Columbian mammoth. It's interesting. You had the Columbian mammoth in what is now Colombia. So we had our own elephants here, big elephants. Columbian mammoths are all extinct now, and they started to go extinct right about the time the Laurentide ice sheet started to disappear and the Sonoran Desert formed. Now, once upon a time, they used to say the reason why the mammoths disappeared and the giant sloths disappeared and the giant woolly camels disappeared was because of hunting pressure from human beings who had just come across the Bering Sea up here as the Coeur d'Alene ice sheet melted away right here at about 12 to 13,000 years ago. Except, of course, we now know somebody was killing Indian mammoths 130,000 years ago here in California. So there wasn't this sudden influx of human beings killing and eating mammoths that caused them to go extinct. It was something else. Something else, I suppose, of course, is domesticated house cats. No, that was domesticated house cats. Something else is the loss of atmosphere that coincided with the Younger Dryas event, which I didn't even show you on the thumbnail, right? I didn't mention this thing, the Younger Dryas impact event. It's something that's hotly debated in certain circles as to whether or not there was an impact or what the impact was. My only question really is what the impact was. Was it asteroid? Was it cometary? It was one of the other. I don't know which. And the fact that we don't have large impactors is not really a great concern, because I don't think it was one singular event. I think it was a continued barrage that we kept on getting hit with, probably from the Taurid meteor stream, what we're calling the Taurid meteor stream. We were picking up larger material from it shortly after it broke up, probably about 12,000 years ago. And then on its repetitive cycles, maybe about every 6,000 or 7,000 years, we would pass through that stream again and get bombarded again by another stream of material. The event at 12,000 years kept on going. And from that time period until about, I want to say around 5,000 or 6,000 years in the past, we had rapid sea level rise. Well, what causes rapid sea level rise other than a lot of water coming into the system? Water in liquid form. Where was this liquid water coming from? Well, part of it, yes, was coming from the disappearing ice sheets, the disappearing glaciers as the glaciers retreated. But a large part of it also was coming out of the atmosphere. Because whenever you lose atmospheric pressure, the vapor point changes, and precipitation comes out. You lose water out of the atmosphere. So we had water coming out of the atmosphere, water coming from ice sheets, water coming from uh, from meltwater lakes off of these ice sheets, all combining to cause rapid sea level rise starting at about 8,000 years in the past up to the current day where we have the current ocean, or the current coastlines that we're more familiar with. Oh, and saying, why was the atmospheric pressure going down? The reason the atmospheric pressure goes down whenever you encounter things like asteroid and cometary impacts is because it causes it to splash out. It displaces atmosphere. And the funny thing about that is we typically think of those big impactors like Chicxulub from 65 million years ago with major extinction level events. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to losing atmosphere, a huge impactor is not as efficient at atmospheric destruction as much smaller bodies are. Much smaller bodies are not having to convert all of that force into a pressure wave and push the atmosphere out. Remember, whenever you hit the ground, you're pushing outwards from there, and you have all the weight of atmosphere above that you have to push out of the way. Coming in at a shallow angle, a small impactor hits, skips, and splashes out a small amount of atmosphere. And you can get hit by hundreds of these. And we do get hit by hundreds of these every year, maybe even thousands per year. Pardon me, I'm taking my shoes off here. And so the accumulation of a whole bunch of smaller impactors, for example, broken up parts of a larger body, planetoid or comet, huge asteroid, whatever it was, that we went into at about that point, that stripped away a whole bunch of atmosphere. And it stripped away enough atmosphere that if we were to look at the human being as we know him, emerging, as I said before, around 180,000 years in the past, maybe before that, but that's the oldest fossils that we've got that are human beings like us. Well, during that time period that we've been here, 180,000 years, the planet has lost about 140, maybe a little bit more, trillion tons of atmosphere. I can calculate the loss of atmosphere because we can take a look at the health requirements of the human being, for example. We know what pressure we need to be at, when we know what concentration of oxygen we need to be at for our tissues and our systems to be at optimal health. By adjusting and looking at that period of time in our past, whenever human beings started to come out and go, hey, look, we're going to go out and cover the world, it's about 144 trillion tons. I know it's a weird number of atmosphere that we've lost. Now, not all of it has been to impactors. Some of it has been to impacts. Some of it has been simply to atmosphere at the very outer limits of what we would call our atmosphere. Very lightweight particles, hydrogen and helium, moving at high rates of speed and large distances in between them. We're talking yards in between a particle, one single atom, yards, before it bounces into another atom and then and does anything. But way out here in our exosphere, we have these molecules escaping from Earth, and it's a few tons a year, but they add up because year after year after year after year, you're losing tons of atmosphere from it's just escaping gravity, scraping the gravity well of the planet. Just it's gone. Occasionally, they fly off. Most of our atmosphere stays around though. Now, the other thing that we lose atmosphere to is the formation of carbonate rock. And the way that happens is whenever you've got shallow water ecosystems and you've got mollusks and the little tiny crustaceans, the microscopic ones, the ones that form diatoms, whenever you get, I don't happen to have a tub of diatomaceous earth around me at the moment, but we use it for making sure that we kill off bugs. If we don't want to put down a toxic spray, we want to use a mechanical kill method. We use diatomaceous earth to get rid of insects in the garden. Diatomaceous earth is formed by these little tiny exoskeletons of plankton and algae that were in shallow waters a long time ago. They formed calcium carbonate shells by taking the carbon from the atmosphere through their life process. They excreted a hard exoskeleton of calcium carbonate. And then whenever they died, those skeletons accumulated. Now, the way things work now in our ecosystem, because things have progressed since the earliest formation of these creatures that emerged and went, we're going to make a shell, we're going to protect ourselves with calcium carbonate, it's going to be like armor. Whenever they first came out, there wasn't anything that was devouring them. Kind of like whenever trees first came out, there wasn't anything that was devouring trees. So we have an oversupply of something, too much of one thing, nothing to eat it. One thing about dynamic equilibrium, you have to have stuff to eat the surplus. If you don't have something that's going to eat the surplus or use that surplus for something, it's pollution. It's a toxin. It's actually an environmental catastrophe. And that's what the formation of these diatoms was, effectively. Without something to consume those shells, without something to take that calcium carbonate and cycle it back and put the oxygen that was in the calcium carbonate, because calcium carbonate is a formation of carbon and oxygen, right, with calcium, to put that oxygen back into the atmosphere, right? So we have the formation of a rock, functionally, that has air trapped in it, oxygen, our atmosphere trapped in it. And so we have this formation of rock, limestone, lots of it, lots and lots and lots of it, especially here in the middle of the country. You get down under your feet, you can take a look and you can see what's under our feet. There is a lot of limestone here. And this was, of course, caused by the sudden destruction of a lot of marine life that had calcium carbonate shells that weren't able to be cycled back in to the ecosystem. Why? Because their ecosystem changed. The ecosystem changed. It was no longer a marine ecosystem. Poof. What is it? It's now the middle of a continent. The middle of a continent. All that life dies. There's nothing to eat it. You get a whole bunch of sedimentary rock formation. All right. Stray Kitten is asking about the Noah's Ark flood. Yeah, the Noah's Ark flood actually does play into the story. I did not prepare I didn't prepare a slide for this today. I don't have a picture for the Noah's Ark flood because I wanted to focus on North America. I mean, we want to get into this about 2.3 million years ago. That's whenever the ice age began that we're currently in. We're actually in a warm period of the current ice age. It was about 2.3 million years ago that started. The Sahara was at one time green. I mean, lovely place. There were people living in the Fertile Crescent, and then something happened, right? There are two things that happened. The Bible as we know it, I moved it over there. I'm not going to jump over there and get it right now. The Bible as we know it, the Tanakh, should be the first 5 books, has a story. It has a couple of stories. One is the story about the garden, expulsion from the garden. Not a whole lot of details, other than some interesting things about the way they described bodies of water, which I think is interesting. I think the name that they had for large body of water and the name that they had for river in ancient Mesopotamia, talking about ancient Sumeria, I believe they're using the same words, and they're interchangeable. So whenever they say this body of water that surrounds Ethiopia, they're talking about the body of water that surrounds Africa, which is not just one ocean, but 2 oceans. But they call it this body of water because whenever they leave their homeland, they go to visit this place, they're going to Ethiopia. They're not going anywhere else. They know about Ethiopia, and they know it's surrounded by water. They just don't know how far that goes, or they don't need to know. It is the body of water that surrounds Ethiopia, and that's what we're going to call it. I can't remember which was Fishon or something. And then they have another one that goes out and it surrounds another area that's surrounded by water. They're not rivers. They're just using the word river interchangeably. This is the reason why you can only find the Tigris and Euphrates. You can't find the other 2 rivers that are mentioned in the Bible account. It's because they're not rivers. Lost in translation. Anyway, at about 5,700 BC, an event occurred. Once again, that cycle of passing through the Taurid meteor stream, lots of impactors, causes loss of atmosphere, Loss of atmosphere causes rapid precipitation. Rapid precipitation causes unprecedented flooding. Unprecedented. And in reality, this period of unprecedented flooding was not just limited to this period whenever the flood that we call Noah's flood occurred, but it was ongoing. It had been happening even before then. So the people who were living at that time, if they were aware of things going on outside of where they were living in the plains of Shinar, so from Anatolia, Turkey, all the way down through modern day Iraq, connecting the Mediterranean and the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea, I think, all the way down to the Arabian Sea and the what's the word I'm looking for? The Suez. So you have Arabian Sea on the far side of the Arabian Peninsula, and you have the Suez on the nearer side to us anyway, here in North America. So you had all this area flooded out. Persian or Red Sea. Thank you. Yeah, Red Sea. Red. That's. Thank you. It's like I had a brain fart. Sorry. All this area is flooded. Now, the event that caused the flooding was a global event. There would have been changes in sea levels all over the place caused by this particular event. Massive loss of pressure, lots of rainfall. It's a global event. It does affect the entire world. But it doesn't mean that every piece of land on the planet is completely covered in water. And I think that's something that we have a tendency to get confused with. It didn't cover the entire surface of the planet completely with water. There are places where the mountains are sticking up, the entire continents are sticking up, and people, yes, were living there. I know this is going to probably step on some toes. And people say, "Oh, it says here that the whole world was killed except for Noah's family." And I'm sorry, that's just not the case. But as far as the people on the boat were concerned, yeah, probably for a while there, that's what they thought had happened. Everybody had died except for them. But then we start hearing stories, interesting stories. For example, in the Genesis account, after the floods have finished, they've come down in the mountains of Ararat. Important that it's the mountains of Ararat, not Mount Ararat. Don't get those two confused. Mount Ararat is in the mountains of Ararat, but it is a wide region, including modern-day Turkey, Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is interesting. This is where they came down, where these particular people came down, right? The anchors are still there in the mountains. You can go, you can see the anchor stones are there. All the way up the side of the mountain, where the water once was. And you can see where the boats came. That's where they were. And of course, the stories came from there, and they spread out from there. The stories are in Sumer, the stories are in Akkad, the stories are in Babylon. The names are changed, but the events pretty much the same. Okay. Well, according to the story, after that first generation had settled, and Noah, or Utnapishtim, if you're Sumerian, had started to rebuild, he'd gotten back into horticulture. He was growing his garden, started a vineyard, started getting day drunk. And one of his kids in the Bible is called Ham. In the Sumerian account, the guy's name is Utu. Decided, I've had enough of this. I'm out of here. I'm going to go do my own thing. I don't have to, he's not following his father's leadership. We'll put it that way. So if Noah was the tribal chieftain of mankind at this point, his son Utu, or Ham, says, "You old man, I'm going to go do my own thing," and he takes off. And he starts setting up kingdoms, towns in the plains below the mountains, repopulating this area, starting up farming, doing the old building civilization thing, getting back to the business of business. Now, his son, whose name was Cush in the Bible account, or if you're following in the Sumerian account, his name was Meshki-Gasher, which I'm probably just murdering the pronunciation, but it's not a living language, so sue me. Meshki-Gasher gets together, builds boats, and travels out from this point. And at this point, you could go any direction because I imagine the waters have not fully receded yet. So you could go out through the Red Sea. You could go out through the Arabian Sea. You could go out through the Mediterranean. You could go up through where the Black Sea is now into Europe, which would have been essentially a big river system. And of course, I believe that's exactly what these people did. I will go and I'll get to your latest here in a minute. We're talking about you're talking about ringwoodite. I know a little bit about it. I'm not sure how you would go about liberating it, but it's interesting. All right, over here in North America, we have stories. At North America, Central America, and South America, we have stories from the indigenous people here talking about people coming from across the water at a certain point in their history, which would have been about that point, 5,700 to sometime in the more recent time, BC, but before the Europeans get here. And the description that they gave of them, they looked somewhat like, well, they look somewhat like me. These people, right? They look like me. They're lighter skinned. They've got beards. They wear funny hats. They have writing. They have technology. They have the symbology that they bring with them. And the interesting thing about the symbology that they bring with them is that symbology of the solar disk is the symbol that Meshkian Gasher had whenever he departed in his boats to go explore the world. And he disappears from the Bible story at this point. Not Ham, but Cush or Meshkian Gasher. This guy disappears from the story. We don't know what happened to him. Now, a lot of people think that Cush went down and settled Ethiopia, right? And he may have, or his children may have, or other people that were involved in these expeditions may have, because at this point, a lot of the story is a little bit confused. It's confused because we have the development of new languages emerging shortly after the flood event. It's kind of brushed upon a little bit in the Bible story, talking about the Tower of Babel or Tower of Babel. This particular incident where language gets confused was of interest. And there's a reason for the confusion of languages that I don't know. It's not related to geology. It's more related to politics. See, right at that particular time, we have exactly what we have today. Everybody telling their own truth and everybody publishing their own truth, because we had writing at this point. They're writing in cuneiform and they're writing on tablets, and everybody writes down their story, and they write down their story telling their story about themselves in the most favorable light, and they write down the story about their enemies in the least favorable light, and everybody is lying. So we come along, we find these tablets with these stories on them, these fabulous stories, and they are lies. And then we have another story. It's another set of lies, sometimes from the same culture, sometimes from a different culture. And of course, we have subsequent ages of people that are telling stories. And Stray Kitten is asking, what is a solar disk? And it might be easier if I just showed you a picture. And I don't happen to have a book that has it there, but that's okay. I can probably draw it. Okay. Solar disk kind of looks like a compass. Hang on. Somewhere around here I have a pen. Somewhere. Or I could do it, you know what, I could do it with, as opposed to going and searching for pictures online and running the risk of getting something that's copyrighted. I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'll just draw it on the screen. I'll just draw a picture. How about that? We'll just draw a picture of what a solar disk looks like. All right. So on the cylinder seals, this is from Samaria, with Meshkian Gasher departing from the Near East, you would see his symbol, and it would appear on the sails of his ships. I'm going to do it in red just because. Okay. There you go. Got a big red circle. Yay. That's it. That's what it looks like. Big red circle. Good. Okay, let me change the thickness here so you can see it better. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, that's good. So, solar disk, big red circle. And then that big red circle, you had it divided into the 4 cardinal directions. And wouldn't you know it, you guys can see that there, you see that symbol all over North America. And stories, of course, about these people that came in boats across the sea following the cataclysm, and they brought with them the technology and the tools for building civilization. And they came and they visited, and then they left and they departed. And another culture further down the coast has the same story about these people coming from across the ocean, and they looked like this. They had the beards. They were lighter skinned. I don't think they had glasses. Maybe they did. I don't know. Some of them might have. But they show up and they share these things with them, and then they depart from the story here in the New World. For a while, it seems that they were in contact, and then something happened. These people disappeared. They stopped going back and forth. They quit the transatlantic or trans-Pacific, depending on what direction they were coming from. They quit the trade. For some reason, they stopped. Now, possibly the reason they stopped coming to visit is political. The society, the civilization that they were attempting to build or attempting to rebuild wasn't getting along. They had problems back home. And of course, if you're reading the stories of Akkad and Sumer and Babylon, then and yeah, also in the Bible, yeah, there's definitely problems back home. There's wars going on, people fighting. City states that have their own independent governments are at war with each other, all across the plains of Shinar. During this series of wars that appears in the Bible account, all of those cities that were on the plain get destroyed except for one. That one's called Zoar. That sounds familiar. Then congratulations, you now know where Zoroastrianism comes from and who Zarathustra was. That would have been in the Zoroastrian story. That also was Noah or Utnapishtim. They keep on changing the language, changing the names. Have you noticed? They change the names. They change the stories a little bit. They write down their own accounts. They make themselves look better. They make their enemies look worse. And everybody is publishing during this time. They're writing things down on clay tablets. Now, aren't you glad? For most of the modern civilization, yeah, I got a piece of paper. For most of the modern civilization, when we write things down, we write it down on paper. So whenever we come up with a spurious account of something, it doesn't last that long. It sort of deteriorates. And if nobody remembers it, then all the better. But we've gotten even something better for getting things quickly. It's called the internet. Right now, we have everything in digital format. Now we get one good solid coronal mass ejection that bakes the world at a nice pace for about 24 hours, and we'll have wiped out all of our digital media. And if the only place where we're keeping our records is in digital form, then we just lost all of them overnight. Oh. Oh, yeah. Hoping you use crayons. I got some crayons. They're in a different room. I'll try to remember that next time. So yeah, what was it? Was it just was it to serve a purpose, or was it a decoration? The way it was done on the cylinder seals, it looks like it was a coat of arms, or it was being used in the way that people use a coat of arms. You put the symbol up and people know, oh, that's his ship. I see the symbol on it, and you can see it coming from a ways off. Kind of important that you have a way that you can identify your ship from other people's ships if you're traveling out and meeting other people that you have lost connection with because there's been a flood of global scale that's destroyed a lot of your old civilization, and you're making contact with people that you haven't made contact with for a few hundred years or more. And you don't know if that ship coming up is one of yours from a friendly civilization or if it's from somebody else that may not be friendly, because some of the stories that we have that go back to this time period indicate that some of those people who got on boats and went out to go back into the business of doing business encountered other civilizations and made war with them. Yep. Arnold's saying they aren't all lies. They can be writings from what people see other. Okay, granted, yes. Whenever I say they're all lies, I'm being a slightly hyperbolic. Most of the time, whenever you take a look at two stories that come from rivals and they're both talking about the same thing, whenever they actually agree on that thing, because they're rivals, and this one wants to make himself look good, make his enemy look bad. This one wants to make himself look good and his enemy look bad. But when they talk about a subject and they agree on the subject matter, yeah, in that case, you could probably say, I've got two witnesses that tell me this thing. I think it's probably more likely to be true. So, correct. They're not all lies, but you do require a certain amount of discernment to dive into those stories and go, what's the truth in here? Because I've got this story from this guy, this story from this guy, and this story from this guy. And I've got a new archaeological dig that throws some shade onto what all four of these guys are saying. So you've got a lot of different stories. You have to corroborate the stories because, you've got a record in clay or in stone, as it were, of somebody who tells a story, and they don't necessarily tell the truth. So, anyway. So why is it called a solar disk? Because it was supposed to represent the sun. That symbol is a representation of the sun, and it was said that Meshki and Gasher departed in ships arrayed as appropriate for a sun god. So he was calling himself a sun god, as was common for people of his particular family. So Utu or Ham did not follow his father's ways. He was probably educated in the old world. He had a college degree, and like all the kids with a college degree knew better than his old man. After all, his old man is old. He's not well educated with a college degree, and he's day drunk half the time. This is Utu. This is Ham. This is this guy, right? So he sets himself up as a ruler. Requires that people come and pay tribute to him, or to his statue, or to his likeness. Kind of like today, you've got dear leader Kim Jong-un, or Il, or whatever his name is, over there in North Korea. Requires everybody to have the picture of Kim Jong in their house. Your house catches on fire, what do you grab? You grab that picture and make sure it doesn't burn up, because if they find out that you let that picture burn up, you'll be punished. Not that unusual here in North America. You used to have a picture of the king in your establishment, King George, in your establishment. If you didn't have the picture of the king in your establishment, you were going to get in trouble. You had to have the picture of the leader up there. You had to have the image of the leader. You have to pay tribute to the leader. Whenever you're writing your story out as the leader with the statue, with the image that people have to pay tribute for, and you say of yourself, I am a god, and you write it down in a form that's more or less permanent, for some reason, years later, people read these stories and they think there were gods. There weren't gods. There were men who were rulers and women who were rulers. There were female rulers back then. Female rulers back at that time period too. Sorry, I ran out of breath for a second there. The story of Utu and his consort, not quite sure whether she was his sister or his mother. And if it was his mother, then that makes what happened with Ham and Noah a little bit more spicy, but we won't go there. Stray Kitten says, Sun God sounds like something American Indians would believe in. And that's exactly right. That image that I put up there on the screen, uh, this image right here, this is the solar disk image that you find in the southwestern tribes. It appeared all over Mesoamerica. It appeared about the time that these people with the boats arrived. That was the symbol that they arrived in. Now, it's kind of interesting that you'll have an old story, an old prophecy, Hopi, I think it was, that talked about how the people of Earth lived together in harmony at one point in time, and they would again, it is said, live in harmony again, but not so long as the brothers from across the sea came in the sign of the cross. What cross are they talking about? They're talking about this. It's an old story. It's before the missionaries ever showed up. They're not talking about the Christian cross. They're talking about this cross, the sun god cross, the old sun symbol, Ham's cross, or sorry, Cush's cross, or Meshki and Gasher's cross. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same symbol. I mean, it's not close to the same symbol. It is exactly the same symbol. So what it looks like is those early explorers after Noah's flood got on ships. They traveled out to see who was left in the world, encountered some people, got along with some, stole some things from some others, including possibly the prototype language that they were using. There is some pre-flood tablets that have emerged in various places that have some of the same symbols. Some of the same symbology appears on these. In some cases, some of the symbols look like Proto-Hebrew. In some cases, the symbols look like what we encounter in Norse script. In some cases, it's things that you see in the outback of the Aboriginal spirals and the half circle indicating man sitting down. Those symbols, that's in there, and occasionally you see what looks like Mayan script, only the way I saw this tablet, it was turned on its side. Before flood. They dated to points in time before flood. What does it say? Don't know. Don't know. That's the interesting thing about it. Don't know what it says because it's just a bunch of symbols and we don't have a reference to a known language that we could decipher it. So it's just symbols on tablets. You know, what is this? Little artifacts that pop up here and there that seem to be from that time period, but nothing we can connect to. All right. Right. I'm saying precludes their enemy is just different. Sometimes it's just a different way of looking at things. Although quite often it's there's warfare going back and forth, and everybody's writing their version of the story. So you'll have multiple different versions of the same story told from different perspectives, and with different viewpoints. And when one viewpoint, this guy's the hero. The viewpoint, this guy's the villain. This guy's the hero, or this goddess is the one who's supposed to be exalted, or this guy. They weren't gods and they weren't goddesses. They were human rulers, but they inflated their own stories. Sun god worshiping, Egyptian, Hindu, Babylon, Chinese, all over the place, and it was spread during that time. Now, the thing I'm wondering is, was that the common practice prior to Noah's flood? Maybe it was. Maybe it's quite possible that this one son of Noah was not like his dad. His dad followed a different religious philosophy. The son went off to college, came back, and said, "I know better than you, Dad. It's the sun. The sun's responsible for all life on Earth. We worship the sun." Right? This is as far as his college education got him. And to a certain extent, I mean, yeah, we do get all of our primary energy from the sun. But is the sun a god? No, the sun's not a god. The sun's not a god. Does the sun affect our religious experience? That's an interesting thought. Can radiation from the sun affect us here on Earth and attenuate how we interact with the spiritual. And yeah, it can, but that's probably best left for some other time to talk about, because it's long, it's complicated, and requires a lot more background than I can give you in a short amount of time. For me, it took decades of study to get to that point where I kind of understood why you would think that there was an association with the sun and the spiritual phenomena, because it does affect how you experience that spiritual phenomenon. If you're having that spiritual phenomenon, by this we're talking about the multitude of chakras that are found within the human energetic system and how they can be connected to the primary source. And whenever you do have that experience, you go, oh, that is also attenuated by radiation from the sun. It can awaken that experience for some people, and they can have a very interesting time of it if they are not prepared. Yeah. There was a whole bunch of that going on this year. I even had a little meditative psychosis incident myself. That was fun. I don't know, saying Cain is the one who rebelled against God. Prior to the Noah story, interesting is that everything that happened prior to Noah's flood comes from either one of two sources. Either it comes from Noah and whoever he passed his particular wisdom down to, which we believe was Shem, and then the inheritor after Shem was his well, I don't know how many greats, great some odd grandson of Ram. That's what we think, but who knows? A lot of these stories have been lost, refound, retold, and in some cases just made up. In some cases, just made up. That's kind of hard to swallow, but it's evident that in some cases, if you didn't know the answer to a question and you didn't want to say I don't know, somebody who was put on the spot would come up with an answer and say, well, it's because of, and they would write it. Somebody would write it down, and then you have artifact stories that don't fit with the rest of the narrative. We don't know what to do with them. Sometimes we keep them. Sometimes we ignore them. Sometimes we write them down and then ignore them. Sometimes we write them down and go, well, we don't know what to think about this story. It's just here for some reason. And if somebody understands it, maybe they can tell you about it, but I don't. Yeah, they want people to worship electricity. No, they want people to worship government. This was actually the same problem that we had whenever Utu and his sons came down from the mountains and started building cities on the plain. They created governments. So we had rule of law. There was law back then, a long time ago. But they said, oh, we're going to say what the law is. We're going to be the king. We're going to be the ruler. We're going to make the rule of law and require that people follow our rule of law. By making the rule of law for themselves and removing the divine law that man already had, as it were, written on his heart. So nobody wants to be murdered. Nobody wants to be robbed. Nobody wants to be assaulted. Nobody wants to be slandered. Universal law. We all have it. We all know it. It's just a question of whether we accept it and follow it and obey it or not. That's this personal choice. If we accept it and obey it and follow it, then we have a civilization that functions. And if we don't, then we have modern civilization. In modern civilization, instead of following the rule of law that's written on our hearts, that's natural to the human condition, we abrogate our responsibility for observation and enforcement of that law and give it over to a third party that we call a government. And in the modern manifestation of that, it's not the guy who gets together an army and forces everybody to obey him through raw brute force, but this is the guy who gets everybody together, that he convinces them that he's going to do the best things for them if they give him that power. That's called democracy, right? Everybody votes. You get your leader that you voted for. Whether or not it's a good leader or not, doesn't matter. You created the system where you give this human being the power instead of obeying the law for yourself, which you could have done in the first place. Just saying, you could have always You could have always chosen to not murder, to not steal, to not slander, to not commit acts of assault. You could have always done these things. Your neighbors could have always done these things. The civilization you're in could have said, hey, you know what? We probably shouldn't steal from each other. But instead, we went, hey, you know what? I'd like to steal from somebody, but I want it to be okay. So we're going to create a system that will allow me to steal from my neighbors and get away with it. We're going to call it government. And we're going to call it redistribution of wealth because they have more and I need more. And if I can get enough people behind me, we can take what they have and redistribute it to us. We'll just create a big pie and take what we want for ourselves. This is called crime. It's called theft. And it's what governments do. So there you go. Exactly like Nimrod. Yeah. Well, this is exactly what we're seeing in the Genesis story. Was Nimrod was one of Cush's sons. He was Cush's son, so he would be. You'd have Utnapishtim or Noah, Utu or Ham, Meshki Gasher or Cush, and then his son was Nimrod. So he was 4 generations down from Noah. Noah was extremely long-lived. Remember, this was a cataclysmic event that caused loss of atmosphere, but the people who were living before this loss of atmosphere lived a lot longer than people who were born afterwards. Go figure. You spend your entire lifetime in a hyperbaric chamber, and you're a lot healthier to begin with. So Noah lived a long time. Meshki and Jasher lived a long time, not as long as Noah. Utu lived a long time, not as long as Noah, apparently. Maybe almost as long. It's kind of hard to tell. Once again, he kind of departs from the story. His name changes. He becomes somebody else in a different story. He becomes somebody else in Norse mythology. You might know him. Instead of Utu, he became known as Utun. Or perhaps you might recognize the name after you harden the T to a D and the U to an I. As things happen and the language changes, he's known as Odin. Came from Azerbaijan in the mountains of Ararat. That's where his story starts. He's Utu or Ham. That's him. Same guy. But his I guess it's his grandson is Nimrod. And Nimrod has his city in Ur that he's the king of. He's trying to expand his kingdom. He's calling himself a god. He has the idols that are set up, the statues that are set up for himself. People have to pay tribute to the idols. They have to pay tribute to him. They have to pay tribute to Meshki and Gasher or Cush, his father. They have to pay tribute to his grandmother as well. The idols. Where does Ishtar, Inanna, Asherah, and eventually the mother and father deity in idol worship in ancient Mesopotamia come from? It comes from this source. It's where it starts, where people are effectively worshiping their ancestors with household gods, worshiping their ancestors and worshiping the ruler and his ancestors. So whenever Abraham shows up and says to Nimrod, hey, buddy, you're not a god. He was challenging the rule, and he was challenging the rule of one of his relatives, fairly close relative. But keep in mind, if Avram, the guy that we call Abraham, is the one that was chosen through the process of passing the wisdom on to this person, it's like, okay, I'm going to teach you what you need to know so you can be the patriarch. So I'm the patriarch now. I'm going to teach you what you need to know in order to be the patriarch. Ham jumped ship. He starts his own kingdom early. He doesn't wait for Noah to give him the thing. He steals Noah or Utnapishtim's mantle of authority. This is what was stolen. When people say he uncovered his father's nakedness, what does it mean? The mantle of authority, the robe, the cloak, the chieftain's cloak that you put on whenever you tell the story of mankind. Only one person gets to wear this, right? It's passed on. Ham says, I'm going to go make my own cloak. I'm going to take the mantle of authority. I'm going to create my own kingdom. I'm going to be the person who speaks the law. He's the one who breaks from the patriarchal line. That's what is stolen from Noah in the story. That's how it goes. Anyway. Yeah, Arnold's saying over 900 years, but yeah, they slowly lost their longevity. Yeah, the environment changed. They may have started out healthier from living their entire lives in what is effectively a hyperbaric chamber. Heavier atmosphere, much more oxygen concentration before the events that caused that rapid loss of pressure and the sea level rise, rapid sea level rise. But yeah, without being able to replenish the atmosphere, people started living much shorter lifespans. We don't recover from injury as rapidly. We get sick a lot more easily. We die a lot sooner. All of that. And of course, we have most likely lost a large amount of the human genome. A large amount of the human genome from that particular event. And events before that. I mean, this entire series, from just before Younger Dryas, there was humans here, there were towns here, cities here, civilizations here. Then boom, 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 a whole bunch of big events happened, one right after the other, right after the other, right after the other, to the point where whatever is here before, it's barely mentioned in a lot of stories, but it's mentioned as if golden age, technological advancements, stories on several continents about people with flying machines and all kinds of crazy stuff. Well, how long did it take us to go from stone tools to flying machines? In our current timeline, it's taken us about 6,000, 7,000 years. Okay. If it only takes 6,000 or 7,000 years to go from stone tools to flying machines, and we have a history, well, we don't have a history. We have a record of modern human type, the being that we are, existing for 180,000 years. How many times can we have reached high technology and completely, totally lost our memory of it? Dozens. At least 20 different events would have destroyed modern civilization as we know it during this time period. At least 20 separate events, had they occurred. Well, they did occur. So, I mean, we can look at the geological record. Oh, well, that happened. This would have destroyed modern civilization. So whenever we look back in the deep past and go, well, where were these people? We hear stories of times whenever people did amazing things. And they fade to myth. How is that possible? That couldn't have happened. It's ridiculous. It couldn't have happened. Of course not. And then as we approach the modern era and we develop technology, we go, oh, well, if they had that technology, then this isn't magic anymore. It's just tech, right? Owen saying, okay, here you lose me again. I give some latitude to ideas we developed philosophy and culture before, but wouldn't there be evidence of prior cycles, surface pit mines, etc.? All right, so this is cool. If you take a look right now at the world, and you see where most of the human beings are positioned. I can't remember which video. It was one of my live streams from maybe a year or two ago. If you look at where most people settle, we don't make the decision about where we're going to settle based upon atmospheric pressure. We make it based upon association with water most of the time. Most of the time, we want to be close enough to water that we have access to water because we need water for everything. We need to grow food. We need it for ourselves. We need it for sanitation. We need it for water's life. We have to have water. But water rises and falls. You get rains in the spring. You get rains in the fall. Water comes down from the mountains. Rivers flood. You have tides. Tides come in cycles. Sometimes you have really big tides. So you don't want to be through hurricanes, areas that get hit by hurricanes constantly. You don't want to be in a place where that water is going to destroy your civilization. You can't have civilization if it gets destroyed. So we have a close approximation to water, but not like right on it. So it's within a certain distance from sources of water. This is pretty much true about human civilization all the way back. But all the way back at the height of the Ice Age, the sea level was a lot lower. So most people were living in an area that is now underwater. So what happened to them? Why don't we find them? Because whenever the sea level comes up and you have constant movement of the surf back and forth, grinding everything away, it doesn't take long before just about every evidence that you had that there was a civilization there is gone. But some of the things are left behind, and some of those artifacts that we have that are left behind are methylated mercury in our oceans. Because even way back then, they were going and mining and going into the earth and pulling the ore out of the earth and treating it with chemicals in order to extract the precious metal out. This is before flood. Well, what happens when an area where you've been mining gets flooded? We know the answer to this one is kind of up in our faces right now in North Carolina, right? All that toxin that was there gets washed out through the river systems out to the ocean, and hopefully you have enough biofilter to handle it. But we're paying to this day with health problems that are a result of some of that mining that took place during a period of history that we have no record of anymore, except for the fact that those chemicals managed to get into our oceans. They managed to get into our food system. They managed to get in there at a time before we have recorded history of it. They were there already. It's not that they're naturally occurring. They wouldn't be naturally occurring. We put them there. Well, our ancestors put them there. Yeah. Protective canopy to a certain extent. Yeah. Mary wants to make a side note. All those humans that they call cave people, the cavemen, our knuckle dragging Neanderthal ancestors, right? Cavemen. Good answer. Is there a source on that prehistoric pollutant? Hard to say, actually. Where would you look, right? Where would you look? Whenever most of that mining operation, most of those operations were done places that are now underwater. That's an awful lot of exploration looking for old mines, old quarries. Some places you can still find what looks like the ruins that are there, but they're not easy to get to. There's a place off the coast of Cuba that comes to mind that they've done sonar survey of, but no detailed dives. It's too deep, apparently. Not to mention it's close to Cuba. So yeah, I was like, no, I mean, like, have we detected it? Well, yes. Um, that would be a good place to look. I'll investigate to see if we've recovered it from set. We've recovered it from marine life, and we have stories going back, way back, giving us prohibitions on eating certain things. One of the reasons we're not eating shellfish, like, why in the world would you have a prohibition against eating shellfish unless there was a hazard associated with eating shellfish, right? Why is there a prohibition on eating pork unless there's a hazard associated with eating pork? The dietary restriction that we get coming down from the religious sources had its sources. I believe those sources were from Moses's education in Egypt. When he was in Egypt, he became aware that whenever you eat shellfish, there's a chance that you can get certain illnesses. It's best to avoid it. How do you get the people to do that? Well, you give them a rule and tell them God told you. Pretty much. There are a lot of things that Moses did that are sketchy. Hey, no, that is cool, because it's like, well, how do you know? It's like, well, a lot of it's anthropological. A lot of it's evidence that says, okay, there was something going on that made them want to avoid the shellfish. Why would you need to avoid the shellfish? Where do we have problems with methylated mercury accumulating now? Well, now we have problems with methylated mercury accumulating in shellfish, in the mollusks, and also in those crustaceans. Avoid seafood flavored cat food. Yeah. One of the things that I've been doing for the cats is trying to avoid the seafood cat food. If it has lots of mass produced fish protein, I'm just gonna skip it. I'll give them something else. That way, if it is in fact the concentrations of mercury that causes cats to act psychotic, we can avoid that. So I don't know if it works or not. I've got two kitties that have been raised with very little seafood. So hopefully that's it's been good for their health. But I don't know. I mean, ultimately, we're just going to have to wait another 10 to 20 years to find out if it improved their longevity overall. I think it will, and I think it will lead to happier, better adjusted kitties. But we'll find out. Experimentation, you got to do it, right? But yeah, I can go and look for sediment assays that would give you an indication of the effects of heavy metal contamination in prehistoric times. Not a very common subject because well, we're you're going to have to get the data indirectly. If I go up to a university and say, yeah, I want to apply for a grant, and they say, what for? So I want to examine alluvial sedimentary deposits from the middle of the ice age downstream from known prehistoric settlements, and I want to look for evidence of heavy metal contamination. University's not going to give me a grant. And the reason they're not going to give me a grant is because they have too much invested in the narrative that says that we didn't have these sorts of technologies until very recently. So there we go. What's the lifespan of a human in cat years in a hyperbaric chamber? That's more than I want to try to crack off the top of my head. But yeah. I'm wondering about some of these flood myths. I really am. If in fact Meshkian Gasher and his cohorts, and also Utu and his cohorts, are involved in building ships, traveling the world, seeing what's going on. They settle in China. They settle Ethiopia. They come across North America. They settle over here in North America. They probably have broad noses and more rounded faces, and they're most likely farming rubber trees, and we might call them the Olmecs. And they have a writing system and a numerical system and building styles that are suspiciously like what you found in ancient Mesopotamia as well. Could just be that some of the flood stories that we're hearing were imported by people who survived the flood themselves. Other people, they're sitting here in the middle of the continent. They're like, "Oh, there was a flood." I don't know. I never go down to the ocean. I try to avoid that place if I can. Have you seen the hurricanes? Arnold is saying it takes 200 years. Good Lord, 200 years for the water in the Great Lakes to flush out all the pollution from the. It's a long time. Straight kids. Sorry, I asked about Noah's flood. Nah, it's okay. It's okay. It's part of the story. It's part of the story. We have anthropological stories about the flood. We have the one that shows up in the Bible. We have one from Sumer. We have one from Babylon. We have stories from Akkad. We have stories from all these people, sometimes on clay tablets, and they are telling pretty much the same story. Occasionally, names changed. In the case of the Babylonian story, it says Atrahasis is the person who is told about flood's going to happen, build a boat, right? Atrahasis is actually Babylon. The word means wise person. So it's not anybody's name at all. And it indicates to me that probably what was really going on was more of a broad general notification. Sea levels are rising. We keep on getting hit by these impactors. Every time we do, we have heavy more rains, fire in the sky. Something horrible is happening. We need to be prepared. What should we do? What should we do? Maybe we should build boats. Be prepared for flooding. Somebody takes that advice. They're the wise person who takes that advice. They don't worry about their property. They build a boat, and they're ready to survive whenever this event occurs. They know it's coming. They have a good indication it's coming. They've probably been tracking the rise of the sea levels for a while. They know that we keep on having these events. They know this stuff is going on. So the wise person builds the boat. Wise person makes preparations. Wise person survives. So there you go. In the Bible story, the name of one particular wise person and his immediate family was called Noah. There you go. Was he the only one? Nope. Probably not the only one. Probably not even the only one who got on a boat. But you get the same stories over and over and over again. In South America, you've got ancient ruins that are there. Almost certainly were there before that particular flood took place. Whenever Europeans arrive in South America, whenever the Spanish get there, they ask the natives, who built these structures here? You know, they've got in Peru, right? You've got Inca work that's on the top, then you've got some older work that's before them. They've gone and they've done repairs, and you can tell the difference in the stonework. The old work is it's massive, it's monolithic. They don't cut uniform blocks. They kind of just dress them out the way they are, but they fit them together so tightly that it's amazing. You wonder how in the world they even do it. And the Incas say, well, the giants did that. Did the giants really do that? Or are the Incas saying that because they got here and they found these ruins that were here from the time before, the time that from their stories and traditions, they were told whenever they got on the boats to travel here to the New World, whenever they came here and settled on boats around 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, that there had been giants in the world before the flood occurred. And so they see ruins, huge ruins, big ruins, no people. The giants built them. It's what their stories say. So they repeat the story. The conquistadors to get over here, and they're told the giants built the ruins. And they're hearing actually an echo of the same story that they had heard from a different source, just passed down through thousands of years in different cultures, finally coming back together again. That's kind of cool, I think. If you look at the Noah story and don't look at it as everybody on Earth was killed and only Noah and these like 9 people survive, which wouldn't make any sense given the current genome. It would take about anywhere from 600 to 900,000 discrete individuals to contain the entire human genome as it is today. And we have lost genes, not gained them. Lost. We have lost genes. We have not gained genes. We are not evolving into a larger body of more diverse humanity. We are losing genes and becoming more alike as time passes and as cataclysms occur and as isolated groups of humans go extinct. We're losing genes. We're not gaining them. So anyway. So yeah, I've looked into this a lot. It couldn't have been just 9 people. There had to be more. They had to be spread out across the earth. The thing that Noah's story is telling us is about what happened with his boat. Or possibly even boats. There may have been more than one boat in Noah's particular group. There's certainly more than one anchor stone on the mountains of Ararat. Anyway, guys, it's been 2 hours. I'm so glad that you guys stuck with me all this time. Just things to think about. All the changes that we've seen across the planet, geological changes. Every single event has caused disruptions, dislocations, and sometimes eradications entirely of all species and all life in areas. Whenever this occurs, the life has to come in. It has to come in from the outside to repopulate and build the ecosystems back up. As a result, over time, nothing is native. We need to get off of this mindset of trying to conserve ecosystems that are in flux. We can't conserve them. It's a physical impossibility. We cannot possibly do that. What we can do is recognize what forms a healthy ecosystem, recognize what species have benefit to ecosystems, and ensure that species survive. And the way we make sure species survive is by making sure that we spread them and keep species diversity up and look for that dynamic equilibrium, which is what makes life possible. Guys, thank you so much for joining tonight. I hope you found today's video informative or entertaining. And if you did, you know what to do. I'll catch you next time. Until then, get out there and get growing.